Hi, everyone. It's Thursday, September 7th, 2023. Welcome to TechTO Quick Takes. I'm your host, Alex Reilly, and here are today's headlines. What will the rest of 2023 look like? We address some of the top questions for the ecosystem on the rest of 2023 and how it will play out. And we look into the sudden disappearance of merger, acquisition, and shutdown news. And as always, Alex Norman is here to help break it all down. How are you, Alex?
A bit sad that Labor Day's passed and we're now in the last third of the year.
I know it's, I feel like August didn't actually happen. I think we just skipped right over the month and now we're into September and back to school and everything, but at least we're getting the summer weather this
Yeah,
month.
it,
So
it
that's
seems
good.
like the last 5, 6 years, September is the hottest month of the summer.
Yeah, that's sort of how it works, right? It's like a last little send off to summer. So that's always good. I'm really excited for this episode because there are a lot of varying topics that we've been talking about, especially over the last 6 months to a year, and just how the ecosystem and the market has changed and what it looks like now. So, the first thing I would like to address with you, and I think what a lot of people were curious to know about, is just AI in general. We've been talking about it so much. VCs clearly are very excited by AI startups. They've been raising recently. So we've been talking about raises and acquisitions within AI startups. And I think there's also a lot of a learning curve still and some fear around, is AI taking jobs? What's the future going to look like? So just around AI in general, do you think we're past this AI hype? And either way, what are the implications?
Okay, so you had many questions there.
Yeah.
So let's try break this down, take one by one. So
Mhm.
this current, if you go back 20 or 30 years, AI every once in a while gets super hot, gets super excited. People get say, we're going to get the AGI, the robots are going to take over, and the world's going to be different.
Yeah.
Um, Even like if you go back to 2014, 15 was the last AI hype cycle. I say this one started around November 30th of last year. And the reason I picked that date is that's when ChatGPT was launched.
Yep.
It was powered by generative AI. Generative AI was already around, but this made it very accessible. Another way to access the tools, and people's imagination started going wild. Let's put the stage back to November 30th. You already had Midjourney, DALI 2, interfaces that were doing really cool prompts for images, but now you can see how you could do all sorts of other things, and it just become the topic du jour. So if you go back to November 30th, I think that's an inflection point where generative AI based startups and LLM based startups got super hot.
Hmm.
Lots of funding came. All you heard about from everyone, how it's going to change the world. So have we gone past the peak in that hype cycle? I'd say yes.
Okay.
I'd say we're getting less announcements about roundings. The roundings are, there's still big rounds, there's still high valuations, but I think they're fewer and far between. I think you can see how we've gone past it, because in January, February, March, it was like how every company's going to be transformed, and now how it's like, oh, is this generative AI stuff living up to the hype?
Right.
Um, what's interesting here is, while I think we've passed peak hype, I think we're just at the starting point of this of the impact it's going to have, because I think generative AI is a true platform change,
Hmm.
and it will change a lot of how we work with software, a lot of other
Hmm.
industries, but it'll go longer. It'll take longer than expected and happen more slowly than expected, and then all of a sudden we'll look back and go, "Wow, this is very different than 10 years ago."
Right.
Um, so like I think that's what you talk about, the peak.
The peak and the hype.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I guess the next question is, implicit question you asked there was, how's this impact the
Yeah.
jobs?
And just the
So,
fear around, is it coming in and replacing a lot of these positions? Because ideally it's meant to save time and make us more efficient. But I think there
well,
is fear around what it's going to look like, right?
I think like any new technology, there's two things it does.
Hmm.
One is it lets us be more efficient in stuff we already do,
Yep.
and two, it lets us do stuff we couldn't do before. And let's say that's split up as 10, 20% of stuff we couldn't do before, and that's a really impactful stuff. And so you're now talking about 89% of stuff it can do is more efficient, and that's the stuff we understand and grok earlier. That's the stuff that causes the jobs to be more productive. Now, when you hear about jobs getting more productive, that means the nature of work people do change, and some jobs will be lost. I think
Right.
coupled with, and particularly with tech, where we were in the macro tech funding cycle, the bubble before, there's a lot of excess in funding and employment in these big startups and tech companies. So they were already cutting jobs, and they will be quicker to adopt stuff that allows them to be more efficient and do more with less because they're forced to do it. So I think, yes, there's some jobs you can directly attribute loss to directly attribute to generative AI.
Right.
I think, and it's either be by making people more efficient, so you don't have to hire people, so you don't hire the people, or it's by just replacing people. So let's go where I think in the near term where you're seeing impact. Let's look at the obvious stuff, like creating an image for our newsletter.
Yep.
Doing a very basic blog, some very very basic writing. I think there's jobs that are not going to be hard or lost because of that. You can now streamline your marketing team a bit.
Yep.
I think there's some automation which also gets you to take 2 3 tools together, and then you can get more of a generalist and change the type of person that can do the job and so pay less or just need less people. So there is, I'd say, probably hiring and needs are going to happen slower in the tech industry because people need to do more with less, and there will be some redundancies. Um,
Right.
I think but in a weird way, I think it'll also help a lot of people. First of all, it's going to put a premium on people that can do stuff that can't be done with tech. I think if you can write real, let's go back to Reddit. It's something me and you are familiar with. I think if
Yeah.
you want to get a blog post that explain quantum computing, you get a pretty basic. You can get a decent one by asking ChatGPT or one of the
hmm
million other AI writers out there. You have to go do fact check. You have to make sure it's telling you the truth. It's not
Yeah. I was
hallucinating.
just gonna say you have to fact
But
check.
the basics is done. Now, if you want some analysis on, hey, why is why did the Canadian basketball team all of a sudden get into the Olympics? I think, or I can't remember what. There's something like I think that's what happened this weekend. Um, you can get a basic analysis again by ChatGPT or those, but to understand the trends, to get the color behind it, to be creative and think, what's the angle I want to take this, make it interesting? Who do I want to interview? You still
hmm
need the best writers and journalists out there.
Absolutely.
Likewise, I think where you're getting efficiency, I think let's take a look at another place I'm seeing a lot of generative AI used, sales.
hmm
Um, that 100% salesperson, like the 99th percentile, because no one's 100 percentile, but 99th percentile, she's intuitively very organized, knows how to get the sales done, does 10 out of 10 things right. Now, the average salesperson probably does 6 out of 10 things right, and the other 4 things, they're a bit behind. They don't know how to prioritize the data, they don't know how to do the reach out. Now, generative AI is now helping them prioritize and be better. It pulls them up more to 80th percentile. So the company's going to be able to do less with more, but probably
hmm
pay the salespeople there a bit more because they're now productive. So
Right.
that's a net impact. So that's the obvious thing. And the other thing is it's going to take a lot of stuff we don't like doing and make it easier. I've talked to companies that are helping take a lot of administrative burden out that no one really does well, no one gives a damn to do, and get removing from jobs. That's going to be net
Yeah.
benefit. I think what a real interesting thing is in that we don't talk because we're past the hype cycle. We're not
hmm
talking about what's the 10% of stuff we couldn't do before, right? What's a really impactful? One I heard of today was I think Zapier
hmm
um, is now sending customized onboarding emails to each individual potential prospect. What they're doing is they're using feeding looking at Clearbit or something like that, looking at the person's title and saying, okay, hey, Alex from so and so just signed up. We see their tech stack's this. We see this as a role. So it says, okay, now we talk in her language. She's a marketing person, so this is what she cares about. This is the type of apps she'll most likely benefit from. And they can do that at scale, customized. Before, it would take a human like 2 3 hours. You could only do
Yeah.
it for large enterprise deals, but now you can do it for almost everyone. So that's something you couldn't do before. And again, it's going to take
hmm
us time to figure that out. Like Uber didn't or Airbnb didn't come day one of the iPhone. So I don't
Right.
know if I answered. And again, what's it going to be? So yeah, there's probably going to be some job loss. It's not going to be massive job loss in the next
Right.
quarter. Maybe and over time they'll just change where you emphasize. Like look, go back to 1999. You heard of webmasters. I don't know. I know the last time I heard that term, but that webmaster's been replaced, and there's probably 6 different roles that replace that webmaster.
Right. And we also typically tend to see, especially with tech and as many efficiencies as it's creating and how it is streamlining processes. Just in your opinion, do you think, because sometimes when we see, a job loss in a sense, it tends to open up more opportunities to hire people to use it in different ways. Would you agree with this? Do you think more jobs will come out of this.
And historically,
We are
that's a
losing
trend.
some.
It's true till it's no longer true. I think
Hmm.
the hard problem for the economy and people is if you have a certain skill set that's no longer needed, the person that's getting new opportunities is usually not you, and you have to retrain yourself. And
Right.
that's what makes these opportunities. Like, let's just go back to like the mid '90s, right? Like, there's probably lots of newspapers jobs lost, and there was a thing
Yep.
called a webmaster, which no one's a webmaster now, but like there's an SEO expert, there's a social media expert. uh, Marketing as a whole is much more quantitative. Now you have a designer, a back end developer. Like, these are all, the person that was doing was figuring out the layout at a newspaper is not the person probably doing design work now. It's a similar
Yeah.
job but different. And the classic example is ATMs. People saw the ATMs roll and go, okay, we're going to have a lot less tellers in everything. There's more tellers now than there was 30, 40 years ago. But the
Hmm.
nature of the job is different. They're no longer just giving you money and taking deposits. They're actually trying to provide you advice.
Right. And even with the self checkout machines, I find there's almost more people that are working to almost help you operate those because
I
I
would say the
mean, I know
self
for me, I
checkout.
always
I agree with you, but that's because self checkout machines are bad
they
technology.
are bad. They are bad. I
They,
agree.
they, they, they actually do not, all they do is shift the burden from someone that knows what they're doing to someone that doesn't know what they're doing. And
Right.
so it's not like out, it's productive it's just example bad
And
technology.
one of the things that drives me crazy is sometimes there's certain things you're buying that you can't use the self checkout for. You
Yeah.
have to go to a human, right? Like especially with, I mean, if you're purchasing alcohol for one thing at a grocery store, you need to show ID. There needs to be a human there, and also sometimes gift cards. I just, it's weird. It's like it's trying to remove the human aspect, but at the same time, we need them more. So
Well, I'm sure if I try to
thing.
buy, next time I try to buy beer, I can do self checkout. Just take a picture of my face and go, he's old. He's over 19 or whatever the age is.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Okay, we covered a lot
Yeah.
with AI. There's a few more questions for the rest of the year, but that was great, and I think offered a lot of good clarity and optimism to a lot of people that were curious. We did speak a fair bit about Canadian politics and just how that's going to impact the Canadian tech ecosystem. So, do you think it will have an impact on the ecosystem from a growth perspective?
Well, so hold on. I think we haven't. I don't know if we've really talked about politics here. Um, Look,
We talked
invo-
about, I think, some of the government funding and the steps towards, I guess,
well,
what
we've talked in the
its
past.
policies and things like that. So
Yeah,
I
no,
guess just,
we've talked past. Like, look, I think there's a
yeah.
fundamentally, well, I guess Canada's potentially entered a recession, but we haven't
Hmm.
officially. And if you look, it's weird. In the COVID, there was lots of fear and the political discussions around COVID and handling it. Then after
Hmm.
that, there was a period where, okay, inflation, and now there's just a general discussion. If you look, there's a certain sense of sort of like a doom loop in the media and the Canadian politics right now. Everyone's saying we have a housing crisis. People
Yeah.
are blaming refugees, or immigration. People are blaming the government. There's hey, our economy's not growing. So there's a lot of negativity in there. And I'd say, a few years ago, lots of policies were one way or another pro growth and pro immigration.
Yeah.
So when the states was kind of messed up with their politics, we opened our doors, and it benefited the tech ecosystem a lot. Not because it lowered rates, but because it attracted talent. And attracted
Absolutely.
talent has two things. It allows us to grow faster because there's a shortage of skills.
Hmm.
Despite AI, there's still a shortage of skills. And B, it built relationships abroad where we could sell into those ecosystems better. Now with, I think we're in an oligopoly ecosystem where the government's trying to still protect the oligopoly with, like, what's it, Bill C-18 for the media,
Hmm.
which, and I think there's starting to be an anti, like, hey, we're pro immigration, but let's not let so many people come here while we have a housing crisis. I think there's a chance that our policies toward letting people come here and work may change.
Right.
So those have, and the mindset of let's protect our industries, let's not let new people come in here, is bad for the tech ecosystem. First,
Absolutely.
let's protect our oligopolies means they have less those oligopolies have less incentive to innovate. Um, the regulations come out prevent us from getting new technology. Like BARD is not available in Canada. The only other two countries I think are North Korea and some other pariah state. Um, then if we start closing the doors, we'll have less talent coming here. So I think we've benefited from relatively good political decision and smart decisions. I'm worried that's changing now, and that will have long-term difficult challenges
Mhm.
for us. And then there's the whole global political situation
Yeah.
where China seems to be decoupling from the West. We've had pretty good relationships with China because we have a big Chinese population, and
Mhm.
it's funded lots of research for better or worse. If it's been a market we could sell into. If that stops, that also impacts both research and potential uh,
Right.
exports.
Right. And I mean, there's also a presidential election next year in November, which I know we've been hearing a lot about. Not sure what the relationship's going to look like for Canada and the US after that, whatever happens. So
No
it's,
one seems to have any real policies in that election anyway. So
I feel like we could do an entire episode just on that alone. Um, I think some good points to highlight, and obviously a couple question marks that you sort of answered for a lot of us, just around Canadian politics in general and the ecosystem. Last, I like fairly large discussion point is just in your opinion, which startups you see emerging as leaders in this new environment, and also maybe industries as well that you see emerging in this new market, new environment.
well, what's interesting, so I think if you go back 15 years, every
Mhm.
3 to 5 years is a new group of aspirational leading companies, like let's call them rocket ships, late stage rocket ships, not early stage. Just because we've been keen to identify rocket ships throughout the years. So if
Yep.
you go back like 10 years, it was Shopify, and it was a bunch of other companies around it. Not all of them survived, but they've gone up. Then I'd say you go about 5, 6 years ago, maybe just before COVID, you had Ada, you had Clearco, you had
Hmm.
Borrowell, Hopper. There's probably 20 or 30 if you spend time Trulio in Vancouver. What's interesting is two things have happened. A lot of them have just gone quieter coming out of the current headwinds.
Right.
So the only one you really hear a lot right now is, I'd say, is Hopper. But like the rest of them have their heads down. They probably had
Mhm.
to reposition for go from growth at all costs to controlled growth. So they're not as aspirational or not out there as much. And to a certain extent, we haven't seen an emergence of the next batch.
Okay.
Um, and it's hard. It's hard to connect the dots going forward, and it's hard. It's easy to connect the ones going backward and say who they are. Um, we've done a bit of research on the rocket ship list for 23. We're a bit behind on producing it, so I could probably identify the early stage ones that would qualify. Um, and it's interesting. I think there's a lot less incentive to be known as that aspirational one. Like, I think if you and there's a lot, like there's like one I'd say is probably in that group right now, but doesn't even want publicities even up. Um,
Yeah, that's
they're,
true.
they're distributed. Uh, they're just doing really well. But founders in Montreal and most teams in Toronto and most teams in Toronto, but they're quiet about it. And
Okay.
I think it's also reflects this current situation where it's not growth at all costs. It's like just go build a real business.
Okay.
I if you ask me who they are, we probably have to finish our research on the rocket ships and say
Hmm.
who's that level that we think are emerging. So that's a good question. Maybe we'll have to follow up on that one.
Yeah, I think that's also probably a good encouragement for us to just maybe do more research and get that list going, because this is definitely worth a follow up. So kind of good place to leave it there.
And anyone listening to this, if you have suggestions who are the emerging leaders in our tech ecosystem, send them our way. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you also have any questions that are on your mind for the rest of the year, or just important topics we may not have covered in this episode, yeah, definitely send us a message or leave us a comment.
Yeah.
What happened to all the mergers,
Well,
acquisitions
let's put a context
we
here.
were
So
hearing about?
there was a normal pace, and I think it's slowed down a bit. But more importantly, if you go back to the beginning of the year and then last year, hey, we're 6 months in to this turnaround in the funding environment. Companies not getting funded as much. There's going to be a ton of shutdowns. There's going to be lots of these companies getting acquired. And we've heard of a
Hmm.
couple, but there hasn't been a lot of shutdowns. There hasn't been lots of acquisitions and mergers announced.
Right. Yeah, and that, I guess that is correct. We kind of had ups and downs with that news over the last year and a half. So why? Okay, so just about the shutdowns, why haven't we seen many yet?
I think there's two reasons. I think first is let's go really early stage. These are maybe they've raised a pre-seed. Companies that are but or have didn't even raise a pre-seed. A few, teams of 3 to 4 people. Um, they can shut down quietly. These
Hmm.
companies never really got off the ground to a certain extent. They may have had a team, and it looks more like a project. They don't necessarily have any customers or lots of employees or financing. They could say, you know what, it's not working. Can't get money. We can't really look at this a shot.
Okay.
Let's shut this down. It's not going to get any attention. So I think there's a set of companies that really never got a chance, and you don't hear about this. I think the second thing that happened was, look, the funding environment was so good in 2021 that a lot of companies could raise, and a lot of them raised more than they normally would at that round, and they hired that way. So what did they do when the funding stopped and their milestones weren't good enough to raise another round? They lowered the burn. A lot of firing happened, like
Layoffs, unfortunately.
yeah,
Yeah.
layoffs or postponed hiring. So these companies that thought may have had 8 months runway or 12 months runway extend that to 15 or 24 or 36. And so what's going to happen with all of these is a few things. They can either get to the milestones they need to raise again. Um, some will get to cash flow positive because I talked to lots of founders saying, hey, our goal is to be cash flow positive. We're going to be there in a couple of months. And some will get acquired. A lot of them will shut down. But what's going to happen instead of this big, rush in Q3 that we expected or Q2 that we expected, because they've taken these actions to extend the runway, uh, the shutdowns are going to happen slower, not going to all happen at once. I think you're going to start seeing them pick up probably in this last third, because if
Hmm.
you extend your runway by 4 or 5 months, you now have to raise or you're done. But I think it might happen. You'll see this the activity and the cash. It's going to take longer than we expected for the cash to go through the system. So it's probably at least another year, and they'll probably get spread out much further. So it'll be a lot less pronounced, and you won't notice it.
Okay, so now that we've covered shutdowns, so how about acquisitions? Why haven't we been hearing about many of
Look,
those?
acquisitions take a longer time to happen.
Yeah.
If they're small, they might not ever be announced. Um, you know, couple that with the reduced burn rates, lots of companies don't have to feel the pressure so that you would expect them, so it just will take longer to happen.
Okay, and just from your, I guess, the VC lens or your perspective, do you see acquisitions starting to happen now? Are things picking up just at this time?
Intuitively, 100% they're already started happening. Uh,
Okay.
I think we're about to see a steady stream of muted announcements over the next several months.
Hmm.
May have started on Tuesday with Rockwell Automation's acquisition of ClearPath Robotics. So on
Okay.
Tuesday there was announcement about that, and the announcement may represent how the information gets out to the market.
Okay, and so just to go into that a little bit more, so what does that mean?
Well, that what you saw with Rockwell, ClearPath Automation. I don't know if they really want to disclose it. You disclose an acquisition for 3 reasons. One is regulatory requirements. So if you're a public company and you have to announce any material transaction that can impact the company, and I think that's what happened with Rockwell.
Okay.
ClearPath, they were forced to announce it. So, and we'll get to how that looks in a second.
Okay.
Second of all, if you're acquiring a company because of customers and there was worry about that company existing, you may want to make the announcement so you can tell the customers, hey, we're a bigger company. We're committed to keeping this product out there. I want to support you. I want to actually grow the product. So it makes customers feel comfortable and you reduce potential churn. And then
Okay.
finally, the ones that you will know about for sure are successful exits. The company's investors will want to share details. So if you look at the first 2 cases, what's going to happen is the press release will be issued with whatever high level details are required by regulatory purposes. And the
Okay.
news will be picked up by blogs and automated news sources. Versus if you have a successful exit, the announcement will provide more details such as acquisition price and post acquisition plans for the acquired team. Uh, Once the news will be syndicated proactively to mainstream media, and the executives will make themselves available for for interviews to discuss the deal. You did not see this with the Rockwell ClearPath acquisition.
Okay. And just from the perspective of ClearPath Robotics, what are the implications for them?
So from what I read about it, again, high level, the technology will be more widely adopted and be sold by Rockwell. But the acquisition was probably not great monetarily. The team investors may have done okay, but it did not make the fund. It did not create a great amount of
Mhm.
wealth. So my guess is this acquisition is a strategic victory. It's very hard to do what the ClearPath Robotics did. They got technology out in the market that people wanted, that a large strategic found interesting. but from a return on investments, this is not your 50x huge win.
Okay. All right. Interesting. And then kind of a tough last one for you. It's a hard question to answer, but just what is going to happen for the rest of the year? How do you see the rest of the year in terms of acquisitions, mergers, and this sort of news playing out?
I think you're gonna have quite a few acquisitions. There is a lot of great technology, a lot of companies, and they just got over skis in valuation, or just not got to the place where they're cash flow positive, or don't look like they're huge markets. So
Okay.
they'll need to sell. So I think they're happening. I think a lot of them won't be announced because they'll be acquired by non-public companies. A few large startups will be saved via an acquisition, but the terms won't be great or announced. Like you could see some of those ones that were hyped up in the last few years get acquired and by public companies because it makes strategic sense. But you'll see they're like the ClearPath Robotics just announced, and the good news though is that this is normal. It's normal. It's painful, but this is part of the tech cycle.
Yeah.
Times are good. Lots of companies get funded. A lot of innovations funded. Not every the reason venture funds invest in 30, 40 companies is because a lot of them don't work out. And when I work out, it's not that the technology is bad or the company doesn't make some revenue. They still become huge sustainable businesses. They're not the next Shopify. But the good thing is that the ecosystem will benefit from this because these companies will be sold. The people at these companies and the founders will have experience what it takes to build a company, what it takes to get the product market fit, what it takes to scale, what scale looks like, and they'll go start the next big thing, and then they'll have a higher chance of success. So the more times we go through this cycle, the more times we have, more shots in the goal the ecosystem has, more likely we're to create the next Shopify.
Okay. And this might be worth a follow-up episode to kind of come back and just actually see how the rest of the year did play out. And maybe if there's anything else that we missed that would be worthwhile talking about. So something I think for us to keep in mind to come back to. Thanks for breaking down some of those important questions and things that were on all of our minds. Just before I let you go, busy events calendar for September, October especially. So just want to quickly high level highlight those. So we do have an event coming up on Monday, September 11th. Fabulous lineup of speakers. Really interested to hear from Mallory Green and just more about her business, Irene, and Andrew Lowe from Embark, Andrew Just of Train Fitness. Cool ways of using AI to help keep you fit. So that's going to be interesting. We also have retail event on October 2nd. We're back in Montreal on October 5th. And then a TechTO premium on October 11th, which is just a really cool venue. We're having it at Rotman, and just, again, going to be a top-notch lineup of speakers. Anything I missed you want to just highlight before I let you go?
I'd like to see more community come out to Montreal. Looking forward to seeing you there. I'm not sure Jason or I will be there. If you're lucky, it'll be Jason.
Yeah, well, hopefully one of you can make it out there. But if not, again, great way to get the local tech scene together in Montreal. Tickets available on our website at TechTO.org. So Alex, again, thank you so much for helping us break down all the news from the last couple of weeks. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of TechTO Quick Takes. Until then, we'll see you on the inside.
We're in the business of delivering impossible things. We're in the business of delivering things that nobody's ever seen before.
If you build that culture, you'll come up with really cool and innovative stuff, and literally could be in the next multi-billion-dollar idea. So this conversation is largely going to be about scaling yourself and scaling your leadership team.
I want to talk about one of the biggest struggles that I think a lot of startups face early on, which is building initial traction.